I welcome you.
Now, in the previous presentations, we have reviewed what is the relevance of Codex, what is the structure of Codex, what is the scientific basis of Codex. We also realized that it is extremely important for countries to align their standards with the international standards, which is Codex, because it's a part of the SPS agreement. The SPS agreement encourages countries to align their standards with international standards. And in the case of food safety, it is Codex. And it is easier to set standards aligned with Codex because you don't have to reinvent the wheel of carrying out scientific risk assessment, which has already been done by Codex according to established principles, policies and procedures. Now, India started the exercise of harmonization of national standards with Codex. How did we do that is what I am going to explain in this presentation. It was a part of the strategy. India's strategy on food safety, India's policy on food safety. One of the components was harmonization and building on teamwork. What was done and how? Compliance with WTO obligations was the basis of alignment. As you know, under the WTO agreement, there is an SPS agreement, there is a TBT agreement. SPS agreement applies to food safety, TBT agreement applies to technical issues. So what was India's overall strategy? First one was to harmonize India's food standards with Codex standards. Second was to implement food safety management systems, starting from good agricultural practices, because food safety starts from the ground. So good agricultural practices, good animal husbandry practices or veterinary practices, good animal feeding practices, good storage practices, good transport practices, good retail practices, good laboratory practices, good manufacturing practices, good hygienic practices. All these are a part of the overall strategic framework on FSMS. And the other one was to upgrade laboratory infrastructure, modernize the laboratories at the state level, set up a framework of national referral laboratories, not just with the objective of dispute settlement, but also to carry out risk assessment, develop data. Data for what? Data for providing to Codex, for setting international standards, and where required, use the data for setting national standards. The responsibility is also to develop multi-residue methods, monitor laboratories, carry out proficiency testing programs, then training of laboratory analysts and introduce food safety education. There is a program run by IGNOU on food safety and quality management. It is a part of this overall strategy. So amongst all these activities and goals that have been set by India, one of the important ones was to harmonize India's food standards with Codex. And that is exactly what we are going to discuss in this presentation. So on one hand, there are Codex standards. On the other hand, there are existing food safety and standards regulations or standards, which were drawn from the erstwhile Prevention of Food Adulteration Act. In the new Food Safety and Standards Act, which was promulgated in 2006 and became operational in 2011, and then other international best practices. A review of all these was carried out to produce India's revised food safety and standards regulations. Now there are two kinds of standards. One is the horizontal standards, another is the vertical standards. You've seen in the presentation in Codex, there are general subject committees, which is equal to horizontal standards. There are commodity committees, which are vertical committees. So the process of harmonization involved both vertical and horizontal standards. When it comes to vertical standards, the quality standards as opposed to the safety standards. Quality standards for fresh fruits and vegetables, milk and milk products, fish and fishery products, processed fruits and vegetables, bakery products, confectionery products, all kinds of food products. And with respect to horizontal standards, which apply across all verticals, food additives, food contaminants, pesticide residues, residues of veterinary drugs, naturally occurring toxins, heavy metals, microbiological standards, etc., etc. And while developing the horizontal standards also prepare codes of practice to facilitate the industry implement the horizontal standards. This was the broad framework of the harmonization process. The FSSAI was promulgated, FSS Act was promulgated in 2006, put into force in 2011. The process of harmonization was started in 2012. With respect to vertical standards, two areas had to be examined. Vertical standards not available in India or not developed by India but adopted by Codex. And vertical standards available in India but may need to be harmonized with Codex. There may be standards which are not present in India but they are present in Codex. And there may be several standards which are there in India but need to be updated in harmony with Codex. So these were the two broad activities with respect to vertical standards that were taken up. What was decided was that we will follow a uniform format for all vertical standards aligned with Codex. This is what Codex has also adopted. Name of the standard, the scope, the description, composition of quality factors, and then there are certain horizontal aspects for each vertical. So while we have horizontal standards separately listed out, there is a cross reference or a reference of that horizontal standard in the vertical standard so that the complete information about a vertical standard is available at one place. And these include food additives, the hygiene aspects, that is the microbiological standards, packaging and labeling, methods of analysis, sampling, processing aids. All these things form a part of the vertical standards. With respect to horizontal, again the same process, same principle was followed. Horizontal standards not available in India but adopted by Codex, and horizontal standards in India but needed to be aligned with Codex. And here what was covered, what are those kinds of standards? Standards which apply across all vertical product categories and codes of practice: food additives, processing aids, food contaminants including heavy metals, mycotoxins, naturally occurring toxic substances, microbiological limits, pesticide residues, residues of veterinary drugs, methods of analysis and sampling, and others, other contaminants like melamine. So all these aspects of horizontal standards had to be reviewed, whether they are available in India and needed to be updated, or they are not available in India but they are available in Codex. So both for verticals as well as for horizontal standards, a same process, similar process was followed. The horizontal standards needed to be also mentioned in the vertical standards so that the information is available at one place. What was the process followed? In India, in FSSAI was just put in place in 2006 and started functioning in 2011. 2012, we took the decision to harmonize with Codex. It is also written in the FSSAI Act. But since the organization was new, there were very few people, we had no means to, we had no infrastructure or people to carry out the work ourselves. We prepared this strategy and put it on the website to invite nominations from the country at large to participate in the harmonization process. We thought that we needed 76 working groups to be formed to cover all vertical standards and horizontal standards. And because we needed 76 working groups, we thought that about 180 to 200 people might be required to participate in the working groups for developing the standards. So we hosted it on the website, laid down the criteria, laid down the product categories for vertical standards and the areas in which we need to develop horizontal standards. We wanted to have people from the industry, from academia, from scientific institutions, from universities, consumer organizations, other experts. We were hoping to have about 200 people, 180 to 200 people, but we received about more than 450 nominations. And we had to set up working groups. So we set up working groups, about 4 or 5 people in each working group, with official working in a scientific institution or a university as the head of that working group, as the leader of the working group, as the chair of the working group, with members from the industry, both large organizations and small organizations. Since the number of small organizations in India is much larger than the bigger organizations, we thought the representation on each working group from the small organizations should be at least one more than the large organizations. So if there are 3 people from a large organizations, from different organizations, at least there should be 4 from the SME sector. And then we also thought that at least one person from the consumer groups should also be present. And based, of course, based on expertise of that person in a particular subject. So we set up 49 working groups for vertical standards. You can see it on the screen: alcoholic beverages, bakery products, cereals, eggs, fats and oils, fish, fruits and vegetables, infant nutrition, meat, poultry, milk and milk products, non-alcoholic beverages including water, ready-to-eat products, salt, spices, sweetening agents, sweets, confectionery, everything including honey, and 18 electronic working groups for horizontal standards, as you can see them on the screen. And what we said was that all these working groups would work electronically because these were electronic working groups. However, we gave the option that in case they wish to set up a physical meeting of the working group, we said we will allow one physical meeting to clear up outstanding issues when they are closer to finalization of the draft. So 49 electronic working groups were formed for vertical standards, 18 electronic working groups were formed for horizontal standards, and 9 working groups for codes of practice. Total 76 working groups. All these working groups started functioning, and there was only one request for a physical meeting. All others completed their work electronically. The procedure as per the FSSAI Act is that these drafts have to be prepared by the electronic working groups, reviewed internally by the officials of FSSAI. These have to be presented to the scientific panels or expert groups set up by FSSAI for a review, and then this work has been completed, have to be sent to the scientific committee, from the scientific committee to the authority, that is FSSAI board, for approval of the final draft. After that, these have to be notified for public comments, notified to the WTO, give 60 days for comments. These comments have to be received, reviewed, and the process of notification would again start. If necessary, send them back to the scientific panel, then to the committee, and then to the authority for final decision of the final standard. And then a gazette notification after approval by the Honorable Minister for Health and Family Welfare. So what we did was, we invited the nominations in 2013. It was not 2012, I'm sorry, it was 2013. And we said that we would have the last date for submission of the drafts by July 2013. For codes of practice, August. The work on codes of practice was not largely completed, but all this, the work of the vertical standards and horizontal standards was largely completed. Certainly for horizontal standards, this work had been completed. These standards have been notified. These were notified to the WTO, and public comments were invited. Consideration of the comments was done. Final adoption of the standards for food additives, contaminants, pesticide residues, veterinary drugs, microbiological standards, all this work has been completed and the final standards have been notified. For vertical standards, a lot of the standards which were already there in the FSSAI regulations were reviewed and revised, and many of them have been notified. Some are still in the process of being notified. Once the entire work is completed, we can safely say that the standards that are in place under the Indian regulatory system are aligned with the international standards, and that forms the basis of the safety of the health of consumers in India, and not only for food produced in India, but whatever food is imported into India will also have to comply with the Indian standards. Of course, enforcement, surveillance, monitoring is an important aspect of the entire process to see that these are properly implemented. Setting these standards harmonized with international standards is one thing, and implementation is an important aspect which has to be handled by the state government under the FSSAI Act. Thank you very much.